Thank you guys for coming. This is like you guys used to call me in the back office before you'd get on to me for something I did wrong.
You gonna get on to us for doing
Now I'm
something
getting
wrong?
on to y'all. Now the tables have changed.
You by yourself? You need some help
I
on
have
me.
no
You need some help on me.
I need some help. All right, we're gonna go all over the board, but I want to start at the very beginning. You guys were born within a year of each other and grew up about a half mile apart. What was growing up in Level Cross like? What was here?
Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm serious.
I lived on a paved road. He lived on a dirt road. No telephones,
No
no
running water,
televisions, no
no
indoor
indoor.
plumbing.
We didn't know that existed until they started racing and took us to the real world.
Yeah.
And then we realized we was no poorer than the guy who lived next door. So it was just plain country people growing up during the Second World War.
So you guys grow up. Next thing you know, you're in high school, you're playing sports, but more importantly, you're going to the racetrack. When did you start going to the racetrack with this crowd?
I don't remember exactly, but I do remember being in Darlington in 1951 to go to South Carolina.
Yeah.
It was a big
And,
deal.
and don't get me wrong, we didn't stay in Darlington. We drove back and forth up until the mid-'70s probably
No
with the
no
team
interstates,
because there was no
back to
place
the
to
country.
stay.
So when you started going to the racetrack with Granddad, what was, I mean, that had to be like a totally, your
Well-
world was here, and then all of a sudden you and Grandma and Uncle Marcy and everybody's there.
We went to the very first race that Daddy ran in a Cup Series deal in Charlotte in 1949. My dad borrowed a car from some guys at the service station where he hung out. My brother, mother, Daddy, and myself drove the car to Charlotte, North Carolina. So when we got there, then he went into Texaco Station, pulled it up on the rack, took the muffler off of it, took the hubcaps off of it. I think he knocked some holes in the floor and put a seat belt. That was it. So that's basically the way it started. I didn't run but 6 or 7 races the first year, and I think he won 1 race.
So that was Lee Petty Engineering.
Right.
That's what Lee Petty Engineering started, which became Petty Enterprises. When did you guys really start working full-time on race cars?
I worked on the race car, went to school, played football, baseball, and basketball, come home, worked on the race car. If the races was close enough that I didn't have to miss school, I'd go with Daddy. Wintertime, I took a business course. Just
You
go
know what
in
he
the
learned to
wintertime.
do, don't you?
Well, we just go
Write
in
his name.
Sign his name.
Sign his name.
and we learned something anyway. Dale would come over and help us on Saturday or Sunday or during the week to work on the race car after he got off of work. And then he went in service for a while.
Yeah, I went in service, and but they didn't let your dad run until he was 21 years
Yes,
old. That was
yeah.
the rule back then. And he turned 21 July the 2nd, 1958, and we went to Columbia, South Carolina with a convertible July the 12th. Lee and Ms. Petty and Maurice went to Asheville somewhere, and me and Richard and Red Myler went to Columbia, South Carolina with a convertible. But we get down there, and Joe Weatherly's down there, a former champion. I guess he'd done won a championship or two, and he didn't have a car. And okay, we're gonna put Richard in this big Oldsmobile, you know. And I said, now if he gets tired, Joe, will you relieve him? Oh yeah, cause you know, a tap on the head back then, no radios. I need relief. Give me some relief. And we're going along there, and I'm more nervous than he is. And we're running along there, slick dirt track,
White tires, golly.
and you know, goes to his head. And I go get Joe. Joe puts his little helmet on, these little golf gloves, you know, with no fingers, and hard head don't come in, you know. So we go along and let's do it again. We do it 2 or 3 times. Going home, I said, Richard, what was you doing patting on your head and you didn't want relief? He said, my head was itching. Trying to scratch his head through a helmet. So see what I've worked with all these years. Golly, so I got to be good, you know. No, I'm bragging.
No, if we go back, and let's just go back to the 50s. I'm fascinated by that time that you two guys were here in some way, shape, or form from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I can go through the list. Bill Sr., Raymond Parks, Weatherly, Buck, the Flocks.
Seen all of them.
All of them. You started in 58. What was that first 10 years like?
That was the grueling part. You got to figure that when we started with it, we started with strictly stock race cars. And even up into the mid-'60s and stuff, we still took a stock car. We go to the dealership, buy the car, bring it home, strip it down, put roll bars in, put shocks on it, make a race car out of it. it was done kind of one step at a time.
Yeah.
Safety features was the same thing. My dad in 1953, had a Dodge, didn't have a post in the windows, so he put a roll bar in it. They was about not to let him run. And he said, look, I'm not going to run the car if it ain't got something to hold the top up. So he was the first one to put a roll bar in the car. Things like that just happened because I guess they needed to happen.
But Lee had a factory deal with Oldsmobile in 1957.
That's it.
I can show you the place down there in the old shop where we had a floor dyno, you know,
Yeah,
and
I remember that.
floor, you know, and then of course, and tell you how crude this thing is. Lee won the championship in 1958 and had a race in Trenton, a 500-mile race in Trenton on Friday, 500-mile road course in Riverside, California. Me and Maurice left like 3 miles down the road here, drove it to Riverside, California, drove it home from the race.
Drove the race car out there and back.
Exactly, with
Yeah.
enough stuff in to run a
Yeah.
500-mile road course back then.
Wow.
And now our tractor and trailers don't hold enough stuff. We got the rent trailer. I mean, just perspective telling what it's gone to.
It wasn't a job being
No.
a race car driver. It wasn't a job owning a race team.
Yeah.
I mean, how did Kiefer was probably the first one that came in with all
With a
his
team
stuff,
car
with
and
a team,
everything.
a team car.
Lee Petty was the first one that sat down and said, I can make a living working on the race car, driving the race car. Most of the guys had jobs during the week, and they'd come to the racetrack and just put their helmet on and run a race. They really wasn't professional race car drivers. They was race car drivers. On the weekend, they worked during the week. And my dad was the only one that really worked all week on the car. Now, these other guys had people that worked on their cars. Raymond Parks had professional people working on the car, but then he'd have flock boys or somebody to come in and drive on the weekend. Red Byron, I guess, won the first championship in his car. And then 55, a guy named Kiefer, who owned Mercury Outboard Motors, he come in with all them 300 Chryslers, big trucks, you know, people with uniforms. He was the first professional operation, I guess, that NASCAR really had.
And you brought it up. Granddaddy was 35 years
35-year-old
old
when
he started doing this. Yeah. What makes a man that's 35-year-olds decide, I'm going to be a race car driver?
He wanted to make a living, I mean, and they raced some down the highway too for big money too, you know.
The
but-
liquor business was getting out.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't
And
want
he
to
had
say
to-
that.
He had to find another profession.
I remember everywhere we had oil guns, squirt
Yeah.
guns. And he'd make you oil a 2-ton floor jack because those wheels will wear out if you don't keep oil. It's solid steel. It's not going to wear out. You know, but I mean, it was all about maintenance.
He was something else.
The big advantage that we think we had was he kind of drove us.
Yeah.
We went up north one time, ran 4 races, got home about 12 o'clock on Sunday morning. We won 3 of them, ran second in the other one. He come out on the back porch with a fork in his hand, been eating dinner. What happened? So what do you mean what happened? You ran second, why didn't you win? I mean,
True story.
that was Lee Petty.
Of course, you had a dose of him a time
Yeah,
or
I
two.
had those. So we all got it. We all.
But the maintenance part was what made our team probably better than anybody else. Because every race, we take everything on that car off, check it to make sure it's not wore or anything, you put it back together. So the maintenance got us a bunch of wins because a lot of the guys, they wouldn't even pack their wheel bearings till Saturday evening before the race or something.
Let's go to 61 and Granddaddy's wreck at Daytona. Because you said something a minute ago that kind of caught me, where you said Lee drove us, Granddaddy drove you to be better. Did you go out of the racetrack that year also?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell that story.
I went out, and they had 100-mile races. I wrecked in the
Qualifying
first,
races.
Qualifying races.
in the first wreck. And I was in the hospital taking glass out of my eyes. My dad went over the 3rd and 4th term
Yeah.
With Beauchamp.
And Granddaddy spent, how long did he spend in the hospital?
till July.
Till July.
Spent
So
4 months.
Spent 4 months in the
Yeah.
hospital.
Right.
Grandmother stayed down there with him.
Right.
So here we are, we're leaving Daytona in 61.
With no race cars.
No race cars.
Because we had 2 cars and we totaled both of them out.
Okay, so
So I go in the hospital and talk to my dad, and he's still about half deal because they got his leg all messed up, all his ribs busted. And I go in there and he says, okay, y'all go home, go up to Greensboro, get you another car. I'll be home about Friday. But he said, go get the car and start working on it. So when we got home, Mother stayed with him. They stayed down there.
Down there.
So Petty Enterprise was up to myself and my brother. You know, we had to do the bookkeeping. We didn't have 4 or 5 people working for us. Had to figure out what races was going to run, who was going to do what. So we ran the business until they got back.
Petty, who moved to second place in 100 miles, is now a spectator. His car is dead.
And my dad kind of turned it loose to us. He'd come in and say, do this or do that, but we were really running the show by then.
In the big picture, how scared were you leaving Grandma and Granddad in Daytona and saying, okay, now it's on us?
Well,
I mean,
I think it
that's a
was-
lot of pressure
boy, you're
at
telling
that
me.
point in time.
23 years old or
Yeah.
something.
You and your little brother, Uncle Maurice, is a couple years younger.
Basically didn't think anything about it.
Yeah.
That was life.
But it beat having a real job.
It'd definitely be having a real
You
job.
know how that works.
Yeah, I do.
I've always been a real big fan of Lee Petty, and now I've changed all that. Now I'm a big fan of Richard Petty.
Well, I hope so. It works out better for both of us that way right now.
It made more money in the pocketbook, don't it?
It really does. When it comes to paying the taxes and everything, it's better if one of us is working.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.